Hey guys, Sharif here at Precision Zone. So today I want to talk optics. What should you look for when buying a scope for precision shooting, whether it's PRS or NRL matches or just long range shooting in general? But first, I'd like to start with a common mistake that we see very often with new shooters. I've done that mistake, I know other people who did, and I still see people doing it today. And that is investing more money in the rifle than the scope. So I'm not saying you should be cheaping out on the rifle, but let's say your budget allows you a $1,000 rifle. You should be putting a scope that is around $1,800 to $2,000 on it. The reason is the gain that you will get from the investment on the scope is way higher than if you put that investment into the rifle. So today I'll go over the features that you should be looking for in a scope, and hopefully that will highlight why you should be investing more money in the scope than the rifle. Now, most importantly, we're not recommending a specific brand to buy here. We're only highlighting the features that you should be looking for when buying a scope for precision shooting. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing I would like to talk about is tube diameter and objective diameter. When we say tube diameter, we're referring to the scope tube that mounts on the scope mount or scope rings, and the objective diameter is the objective lens diameter right here. Now, why is that important? It's important when we're talking about objective lens, for example. A bigger objective lens will allow more light in the scope, thus making your image brighter, especially important if you are shooting in cloudy environment. Now, while the tube diameter does decide how much light goes into your scope, more importantly, it decides how much dial-in correction you have in the scope. So how much dial-in elevation and windage. And that's important because it does allow you to hold at further distances or dial in for further distances. So for example, I have the Vortex Viper PST Gen 2, 5 to 25 by 50. And 5 to 25 is the magnification, and by 50 is the objective lens diameter. So this scope has a 30 millimeter tube diameter, and the objective lens, like I said, is 50 millimeter. Now, when we come to the Apex Rival, for example, it has a bigger tube diameter at 34 millimeter and a bigger objective lens diameter at 56 millimeter. If we go to a higher end scope like the Tangent Theta 7 to 35, it has a 36 tube diameter, and the objective lens stays also at 56 like the Apex Rival. Now, the recommendation here is to try to pick a scope with a bigger tube diameter and a bigger objective lens diameter. The happy medium right now in the industry is the 34 millimeter tube scopes. Now, the next thing to consider when buying a scope is the glass. Glass plays an important role in the performance of your scope. Now, the challenge with glass, though, is that it's not something that you can easily measure. Some brands will provide measurement like light transmission in percentage or the type of glass. So ED glass, for example, is extra low dispersion glass. Now, all that is great. What I really recommend is that you try to go out there, get your hands on the scope that you would like to buy, and try to look through it. And if you can do that outside, that is even better. Now, if you cannot do that, try to buy scope from a reputable brand so you can at least know that you're getting a good quality glass, and read about it, see what people say in the reviews about the glass and the clarity of the glass. Next thing to consider is magnification. And that's one of the things that brands will give you to choose from and will give you options for. For example, 3 to 15, 4 to 20, 5 to 25, or even higher, up to 32 and 34 times. Now, people usually tend to get hooked on higher magnification, and that's understandable. But unless you're shooting F class or bench rest matches, you don't realistically need that much magnification. Now, the reason being is when you're shooting matches like PRS, NRL, or even doing long range shooting, you want to be able to locate your target easily, and that requires a bigger field of view. So, usually, you would be around the 15 to the 18 magnification mark. You don't really need more than that. Now, all that to say is if you're planning to put more money to get the higher magnification, you don't realistically need that. Now, another consideration to keep in mind is if you're planning to shoot matches like NRL that has like weight restriction for the rifle, you also need to realize that more magnification means more glass and more weight for your optic. So keep that in mind when you're making the choice for your scope.
Guys, real quick, I want to tell you about our new podcast, 7 Minutes of Precision. It's a short format podcast where we talk with industry professionals and shooters about everything related to firearms and precision shooting. Spoiler alert, it tends to go beyond the 7 minutes mark. You can watch it on YouTube or listen to it on Spotify. We will have the links down in the description below. Tune in and let us know what topics you would like us to discuss.
Now, I'll talk briefly about mils and MOA. There are many other videos that will explain that in depth, but in essence, mils and MOA are both angular units of measurement. So mils is milliradian, MOA is minute of an angle. Now, if you're planning to buy a scope to shoot matches or even long range, I strongly recommend that you get a scope with mils correction. Now, I personally believe that is easier to dial for, but more importantly, that is what everybody is shooting right now. So if you're in a match and you're talking with other people, it helps to be speaking the same language so you're able to communicate better about hits and misses. Another decision you have to make when choosing your scope is choosing your reticle. So the reticle is the crosshairs that is etched inside your scope. They also have some other lines that will indicate angular measurements, hopefully in mils if you chose a mil scope. Uh, Most of them are proprietary to their brands. Some brand will have only one to choose from, and others will have three or four to choose from. It's important that before you buy the scope, look at the reticle. Usually they are published on the brand and they have explanation what do the dashes and the dots mean. Most of the ones that are out there right now for precision shooting are a Christmas tree reticle of some sort, and sometimes they do get overwhelming. So the recommendation is if you do choose from a couple of reticles, it is okay to choose a simpler reticle if you know how to use it effectively, than get something that is too busy, that it's overwhelming, and it becomes a simple crosshair for you. So make sure to look at that before you buy the scope, and you will find this information on the manufacturer's website.
This brings us to FFP versus SFP. FFP is first focal plane and SFP is second focal plane. Now what does that mean? So like I said before, your scope has a reticle that is etched on the inside. And that reticle has dashes and dots which signify angular measurements. Now in a first focal plane scope, when you go through the range of magnification, increasing and decreasing it, that will also increase the size of the reticle on the inside. So it will grow and shrink as you move through magnification. Versus a second focal plane where your reticle is fixed on the inside. Now, in a second focal plane, that means that your reticle dashes and dots are only true at a specific magnification. So let's say at max power. Versus a first focal plane scope where all the dashes and the dots are true throughout the whole range of magnification. It is really important if you're shooting matches or doing precision shooting to go with a first focal plane scope. It does come at a little bit of a higher price compared to the second focal plane scope, but it's really important because you should be able to make corrections through your reticle effectively throughout the whole range of magnification of your scope. Another thing to pay attention to when selecting your scope are the turrets. So that's one of the things that will make your scope really expansive. And the turrets is where you dial in your correction for elevation and windage. The most important thing with turrets are accuracy and repeatability, which is known in the industry as tracking. So in the simplest term, let's say you take 2 shots at 0, then dial in 10 mils, take 2 more shots, then come back to 0 and take 2 more shots. Will the last 2 shots land exactly where the first 2 shots did? In order to achieve this, manufacturers need to build your scope with really high tolerances, and that's what makes it expensive. Another thing to pay attention to are the clicks. Are they tactile or they're mushy? Are you able to tell how many clicks you exactly dialed in, or you can't really tell the difference? Really important when you're on the firing line, under stress, to be able to tell how many clicks you dialed in. Another feature that you will see in scopes are dial indicators, which is an indicator that will pop on the elevation turret, basically telling you you have reached the second revolution of your turret. So you're at way more drop than the first revolution. So let's say you're at 16 mils versus 1 mil. A really neat feature to have, not essential, but it's good to have. The last two things are the parallax turret and the illumination. So the parallax turret is not really an option, especially in higher end scopes. You will have it anyway, and it will help you adjust your parallax. Illumination will illuminate the reticle on the inside. So if you're not planning to shoot at sunset or sunrise and you have to pay extra money to get the illumination, maybe that's something that you can skip on. So that's something that you should decide for yourself. Another feature to look for in your elevation turret is a zero stop system. And that's one of the features where I will pay extra money to have in the scope, a really useful feature to have. Now, what is a zero stop? So let's say you get your scope, you mount it on the rifle, you go to the range, you zero at 100 meters. There's a little bit of elevation below that 100 meters point that you're not going to use anymore. So when you're dialing to 10 mils and you want to come back to zero, you want to know that you're exactly at zero and not below that limit. This is where the zero stop comes in handy. When you set your zero stop, you'll basically set a wall where you're going to hit and know that you're at zero. So when you're dialing back, you hit that wall and you know that you're at zero. Scopes will do this differently. What I recommend is, first of all, make sure that you have a zero stop system in your scope. Second, pick a system that is simple to set. Some of them are a little bit more complicated, and when you're setting up, you maybe have to go look through your manuals to remember how to set it up. You want something that is simple, especially when you're shooting a match or something. You want to zero, set your zero stop, and move on with your life. You don't want to be fiddling around trying to figure out what the hell you're doing. Guys, this brings us to the end of the video. I hope going over these features will help you in picking the right scope for you. I also hope it highlights why you should be investing more money in the scope than the rifle. Now, if you'd like to see a comparison of high-end scopes, our good friends at Area 419 made a great video comparing the most common scopes in PRS. We will link it down in the description so you can go take a look at it. Finally, let us know in the comments, what are your experience with optics? What kind of features do you like to look at and you consider important, and other features that you don't really pay too much attention to? Thanks for watching. Until the next time.